समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
This episode of Cut the Clutter has been sparked by an article in Financial Times. A nice big article in Financial Times. Headline: Can Pakistan's military strongmen fix a failing nation? By Alec Russell and Hamza Jilani. So thank you, Alec Russell and Hamza Jilani, because you gave us a starting point for this. Your big long article. I will share a link with you. I know it's paywall. So once again, you want to read good editorial content, pay for it. Pay for the print also, although we are not paywalled, but good editorial content means you pay for it. In any case, I'm telling you of what they said. What they've said is that Pakistan's economy has started doing very badly over the past 10-15 years, and there is data and there are graphics which are all based on IMF. What this did was, because they also have a graphic to show how Pakistan's per capita GDP has fallen in comparison with India, which is an arch rival. Now, India may be the arch rival for Pakistan, but there is another country with Pakistan can be benchmarked. That is the eastern half that broke away in 1971 after the great massacres and excesses and rapes, etc., because West Pakistan did not want to give Eastern Pakistan and its voters their legitimate rights. Now that one broke away. At that point, that was seen to be as a kind of basket case that will not be able to sustain itself. So what has happened there? Now, don't catch me going right back to 1947 or 1971. In any case, I'm not an economist. I know no economics. I'm searching for an equally apt but not such a rude word for it. But the fact is that I'm shit scared of mathematics. So don't catch me doing any of that. What we have done is we've got data, because we thought Pakistan, India, FT has made this comparison. Let's also look at the comparison between the three nations. That's India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. More India and Pakistan, but also let's bring Bangladesh into the mix and go right back to 1980. That's a long enough period. 45 years, that is the period for which we get reliable data from the IMF itself. So once again, we are relying on the IMF. Now, all of the three countries, you will find in the course of time, their per capita GDP has gone up. I'm not looking at the full GDP now, per capita GDP. That's a question of how well are the people of each country doing. Now, how has that changed? When we look at the data, what I'm going to do is, I will not take you through all 45 years. I will look at some turning points starting with 1980, where either side either picked up momentum or lost its momentum, in some cases decisively, which at this point of time applies to Pakistan, because at this point of time, Pakistan is way below India. So three things FT has talked about. One, Pakistan's per capita income relative to India's. At this point, it's about 60% of India's. Then FT's projection is that by 2030, even with the IMF program, etc., Pakistan's per capita income will be about 45% of India's, less than half of India's. That's also because Pakistan has a much higher birth rate. So population will go up. As you know, the entire GDP of the country is divided by the population. And that'll be a double blow for Pakistan. One, its growth rate will be much slower, and second, its population growth will still be much higher than India's. That's the Pakistan-India comparison. And if somebody thinks its critical minerals will come in and maybe some oil will be found in this period, that is a snake oil salesman, because even if there are critical minerals, it takes time finding them, refining them, selling them, etc. It's not going to happen in this period of time. So that is where Pakistan stands now. Where did Pakistan lose out? Again, From where did Bangladesh start, say in 1980? How did it progress? Where did it lose out in this case? And where did it pick up? And similarly, India. Where was India vis-a-vis both Pakistan and Bangladesh 45 years ago? How did it catch up with each other? When? Where it fell behind, right? And where did it steal a march, right? What were the turning points? Because when you look at this data, this basic data and the turning points, you can understand very, very much the politics of this subcontinent or the relative political fortunes of the three nations, one in the middle, that's India, and the two others which were carved out of it in 1947. The other two graphics in Financial Times, one talks about the levels of investment. Growth is a direct result of the kind of investment you have. And that graphic will tell you, these are all IMF figures. IMF tells us that Chinese investment levels are about 40% right now. At the next level is Cambodia at number 2, and just behind Cambodia is India at just around 30%, and then Sri Lanka at about 27-28%. The world average is 25%, but where is Pakistan? Pakistan is just around 15%, and that also reflects in the growth of the country. And similarly, the FT article tells you that Pakistan's poverty reduction has stalled. Its poverty was declining as it's been declining in Bangladesh and India. India more consistently, in Pakistan's case, it declined from 64.3% to 18.3% between 2001 and 2022. That's quite impressive. But in the following 3 years, poverty is back. Poverty is back. It's gone up by 7 percentage points. It's the only country in this subcontinent where population under the poverty line is increasing. That is very counterintuitive in given today's state of the world, because you are not looking at Sudan. This is another country in the subcontinent, a large country, which had an impressive record of reduction of poverty, but over the past 3 years, this has reversed. Now Pakistan's population under the poverty line, which was 18.3%, is now at 25.3%, which FT tells us is an 8-year high. Now, this is what Asim Munir says that he's trying to reverse. Asim Munir and his government, and the general arrangement in Pakistan, if you talk to many Pakistani experts, it is that Asim Munir will run the politics and will run the diplomacy and strategic and military affairs, whereas the elected government will run the economy. But that isn't quite true, because the organization or the body that sits on top of all of Pakistan's economy right now is Special Investment Facilitation Council, that is controlled by the Field Marshal himself, or Donald Trump's favorite Field Marshal. So he's going to be controlling the economy as well. And all these promises, as I told you, critical minerals, copper, gold, copper may be closer, but copper, gold, oil, these lie far in the future, because no matter what you do, there is a lead time to these things working out, even if you find the things that you imagine are there under your soil. That said, let me take you back to 1980. Very often, if you've been following Cut the Clutter, National Interest, my other public speaking and writings, you will find that I keep saying that in 1985, when I went to Pakistan for the first time, I suddenly realized that the average Pakistani was much richer or much less poorer than the average Indian. Also, the quality of infrastructure, the quality of life, the quality of many things was much better than India's. And it's only when I came back I realized that that's because Pakistan's per capita income at that point was considerably higher than India's, more than 60% higher. So let me take you back 5 years before that also, 1980. 1980 is also a good cutoff point in the history of the subcontinent, because that is when India has beaten the emergency. Mrs. Gandhi was defeated in 1977. Another government came in. That was also defeated in 1980, and Mrs. Gandhi came back in. The important thing is, the impressive part is that not only did India defeat a dictatorship or get rid of a dictatorship, the emergency, but also changed two governments entirely peacefully and credibly through elections following a consistent constitution. Similarly, 1980 is a turning point for for this subcontinent, for Pakistan as well, because 1979 is when the Soviets invade Afghanistan and Zia-ul Haq has just taken over power in Pakistan. Similarly, in Bangladesh, a military dictator has taken over. As we know, in 1975, Mujibur Rahman was assassinated. So this is a good point to start in 1980. If I take you back to 1980, and you will see these graphics running on your screens, and you will also see how these graphics move. In 1980s, India's per capita income, all of this, mind you, all of this is in constant dollars. The value of the dollar today in 2025, constant dollars, and also nominal, not PPP, because PPP arguments come up. Oh, how did IMF calculate? In my country, you can get more for this much money. So I usually keep it simple and keep it vanilla nominal figures on GDP. I don't go to PPP. So if you look at just nominal constant dollar figures, in 1980, India's per capita income was $270. Pakistan was $479, right? Just do a quick calculation, right? In fact, you will see a calculation on your charts also. If you see a quick calculation, Pakistan's per capita income in 1980, 176.87%, let's just say 177%. You could say almost twice as much as India's in 1980. So even Bangladesh per capita income was higher than India's. Bangladesh at that point was 311 compared to India's 270. So Bangladesh was 114% of India. Then we come to 1985. Why is that a turning point? Simply because, as I can tell you, that's the first time I went to Pakistan, but also because that's when Rajiv Gandhi has come to power in India. India seems seen some instability internally, but an optimistic new government has come to power in India, and Rajiv Gandhi is talking a little bit the language of reform. At the same time, India has also shown incredible strength and stability, and its democracy has passed one more test. Pakistan, Zia-ul Haq is still reigning supreme. Soviet Union is still there in Afghanistan. That jihad, which the Americans and the West would call a good jihad, later they said bad jihad. Anybody talks of jihad is a bad jihadi and a terrorist. But at that point, they were freedom fighters and very virtuous people. 1985 is the peak of that. By this time, billions in aid and military stuff has come into Pakistan. You can call it aid. I would call it billions in rent has come to Pakistan, because they become critical to the Americans and the American allies running the jihad or so-called jihad in Afghanistan. In 1985, India's per capita income is $302. Growth has been slow, but remember also it's constant dollars, so that value has its own dynamic. 1985, India is 302. Pakistan is 545. That is the first time I've gone to Pakistan, and as I keep saying, my eyes popped out saying that these guys look much richer than us, right? And I don't see any extreme poverty, not at least in the cities. I didn't travel the first time so much in the villages, but in the cities, much less, if at all. No pavement dwellers, even in Karachi at that point. Now, at that point, no pavement dwellers, even in most parts of Karachi at that point. Of course, I did not go to some of the slummier areas of Karachi on my first visit, which I did subsequently. So 1985, India is 302, Pakistan is 545, that is 180.5% of India, and Bangladesh is 317, that is 105.06% of India. So Bangladesh still is a little less poor than India. Then we come to 1991. 1991 is the pre-reform year. That is the reason it's a turning point. It's the pre-reform year. India has taken a few hard knocks in its governance. 1989, Rajiv Gandhi lost power. A very shaky coalition came into power under VP Singh. It was also a divisive coalition, because that's when the whole Mandir and Mandal contest started in the Hindi heartland. That government lasted less than a year. Chandrasekhar lasted less than a year. There was profligacy from Rajiv's era, which carried on into VP Singh and Chandrasekhar. Chandrasekhar not so much, more in VP Singh, but VP Singh was not there long enough. However, many things stalled at that point. So 1991, this is when India has its big balance of payments crisis. India did not go bankrupt. It has a balance of payments crisis. It did not have enough dollars to pay its foreign debt or for its foreign purchases, for its imports. That's the situation that Pakistan goes through routinely. It's gone through this 24 times already since 1958. I think India has done it thrice. Bangladesh has also done it about 12 times since 1971, but this is not a place where India goes often. In fact, that was the last time India had gone there. There was a balance of payments crisis. So India's per capita income had stalled by now. It was at $305. Pakistan was $684. So that makes Pakistan in 1991 223.99. That means the average Pakistani was either a little over twice as rich as the average Indian or about less than half as poor as the average Indian. That was the peak of the Pakistani advantage. Why in 1991? Because by this time, between 1979, the Soviet invasion, and 1991, a lot of this rent from the Americans and other Western powers, and also from China, Saudi Arabia, etc., had come in, and it had gone straight into Pakistan's economy. Bangladesh at this point was $402, which also made it 131% of India. So once again, 1991, both Pakistan and Bangladesh were ahead of India. And then things began to change. See how things change. Come to 1999. Again, we've chosen 99 because that was the year of Kargil. When we nearly went to war, we had half a war or maybe a chota war, a limited war already. At that point, India's per capita income 441, constant dollars, nominal 441, Pakistan 725. So Pakistan is now 164% of India, which means an advantage which was 224, about 224, has now declined to 164 and gap has begun to narrow. That gap has narrowed with Bangladesh also, and there is a reason for that which we'll come to. Bangladesh has come to 111% of India. Then India and Pakistan have had Kargil, and then we've had 2 years of Op Parakram. Then also Vajpayee government, after Op Parakram, once there is peace, Vajpayee government goes into overdrive with reform. So see what happens in 2004. In 2004, India's per capita income is 624, Pakistan is 885, still ahead of India. So Pakistan is about 141, 142% of India. And Bangladesh, by this time, has slipped. Bangladesh is about 90.22% of India. So see what's happened between 1999 and 2004. It looks like the Pakistanis have widened the gap. In spite of the fact that India has had good growth in 2003, 2004, beginning third quarter of 2002, so much so that Vajpayee government has gone to the polls on the promise of shining India, that India is shining. That's because, remember, 2001 is the year of 9/11. When that happens, then Americans again come into Afghanistan, this time to fight the Mujahideen or the Taliban, who were the successors to Mujahideen. They were their babies. Now they came to fight them, and once again, they needed Pakistan. So Pakistan was so fortunate that for them, the tap of rent opened again and enormous amounts of money came in the Musharraf era in Pakistan. So Pakistan was able to hold its own. However, what did not happen was, all this while, Pakistan did not build any institutions, whether political institutions or institutions of governance, constitutional institutions, or even educational institutions to build intellectual capital. They were very much a rent-dependent nation, and see what happens when the rent goes away. And that is the reason our next turning point is 2009. See what happens by 2009. 2009, Pakistan is still ahead of India, but just ahead, because India is now catching up. Beginning 2002, India has resumed its reform, which Narasimha Rao had started in 1991, then it stalled in about 3 years. Vajpayee government, in the second half of its tenure, resumed very active reform. That's when privatization took place. And then Manmohan Singh government carried on from there. UPA 1 carried on from there despite the fears. So India is now 1094, Pakistan is 1108. In 2009, this is after the global economic crisis, which is only 101.28% of India. So just marginally more than India. And Bangladesh this time has fallen behind significantly. Bangladesh at this point is just $841. That just makes it about 77% of India. So they've lost their lead that heavily. And I will give you a possible or a plausible reason why. However, this is the fact. At this point, again, Pakistan is just about 101% of India, so 1.2%, 1.3% more than India, very marginal. But they are 31% ahead of Bangladesh. And that's because Bangladeshis have done something to themselves, which got fixed in the subsequent years. Again, come to 2010. 2010, because that is the year after the global financial crisis. This is the year, also this year is significant because that is when India has left Pakistan behind. It's a very important year in the subcontinent's economic history. These are IMF figures. Nobody's made them up. 2010 is the turning point. India is at 1347, that is $1,347. Pakistan is $1,137, which means Pakistan is now down 84.45 of India's per capita GDP. Remember, when we started 30 years before this, in 1980, Pakistan was almost 180% of India's GDP. Now it's about 84.45%, let's say 84.5% of India's GDP. So it's really fallen behind. That's also because that was the year also of double-digit growth in India. There was inflation, but there was also growth in India, and growth goes into your per capita incomes. Then come to 2015. We've chosen 2015 because that's the year of big political change in India. Political changes in Pakistan, I will take you through when we come to more analysis. 2015, Pakistan has caught up a little bit, but not that much. And part of that is also the 2 years of economic stall under UPA 2 in India. That's when Pranab Mukherjee came in as finance minister, and he thought he will restore the glory of the Indian state. So we will again become a state-run economy. He was the greatest statist in our political history. That's when the Vodafone amendment came in, and much else also came in. A lot of phone banking, quote unquote, phone banking also took place in that period. Still, India stayed ahead, but Pakistan was able to close the gap. 1583 for India, and Pakistan is at 1535. They are still below India, but they are about 96.93% of India's per capita. In 2010, they were 84.5% of India's per capita. These are the UPA 2's 2 years of stall. Then we come to 2019. The reason we've chosen 2019 is that is the year before the pandemic. India has already endured the shock of demonetization. Yet at this point, India is 2041, Pakistan is 1500, because India chose a march over Pakistan in 2010. And since then, India hasn't looked back. It's like once you leave the other guy behind, you don't slow down, you keep running faster and faster and faster, and the gap widens. There are two reasons for that. As I told you earlier, one, India's economy is growing much faster because now the impact of all the reforms made, of all the institutions built, or all the tech and intellectual capital created, that's begun to pay back for India. And second, India's birth rates have declined as Bangladesh is. So Bangladesh has also benefited greatly in per capita terms because of its birth rates declining, and Pakistan is now getting left behind. So 2019, India is 2041, Pakistan is 1500. That is just 73.5% of India's GDP. Once again, starting with 180% down to 73.5%, and Bangladesh is still a little bit above India, 105. They had lost out to India. They had fallen India quite substantially by 2008, 2009. But by now, they have caught up. And there is a reason. The reason is 2008 is when when they have a political government. Until then, they had many years of instability. 2001 onwards, there were many caretakers or many chief executives, right? Under them, things don't, or chief executives or chief advisors. Under them, for 6-7 years, Bangladesh economy had a massive stall. That's the situation the Bangladeshis have right now. They have again have chief advisor, and they know from their history that if chief advisor run government is not good for their economy. And once again, Bangladesh has seen a decline in its growth, quite a substantial decline in its growth since the new arrangement, let me say, took over. 2 years of pandemic, we'll leave those pandemic years behind and come to 2022. 2022, India is 2,347, Pakistan is 1565, so now 70% of India. So Pakistan is declining as a percentage of India's per capita GDP. Bangladesh is 2497, so still a little bit ahead of India, which is very impressive for Bangladesh, probably because during the pandemic, they haven't had as much or as strong a lockdown as India did. 2025, things have changed even more radically, but in the same direction. 2025, for which we have data from IMF, India's per capita income is 2,818. Pakistan is 1,706. That makes Pakistan 60.5% of India. So just think about it. A country that started 45 years ago at about 180% of India's per capita GDP is now about 60% of India's per capita GDP. If these projections, IMF projections, very conservative, if they come out true, because I would say that they are conservative in guessing India's growth also. But even if these projections are correct, then by 2030, Pakistan's average per capita income, per capita GDP will be less than half of India's. In Pakistan's case, I've often said this is the price Pakistan has paid for making terrorism or quote-unquote jihad a part of their national security policy and their national mission. Because what happens is once you start harboring those groups and once your government starts following that policy, your capital leaves, your financial capital leaves, your intellectual capital leaves, other investors don't come in. Just the other day, just a few weeks back, Procter & Gamble left Pakistan after almost three and a half decades. And several other MNCs have left Pakistan because nobody wants to live in a militant state of stability. Even if it's stability, you might say the field marshal is there, the state is stable, but it's a militant state of stability. And if you think that the field marshal's basic agenda is to be constantly at war with India, then why should you bring your money to Pakistan? And if you're a Pakistani and have capital, you'd rather take it out. In any case, Pakistanis also allow dual citizenship. And that is the price that Pakistanis have paid. There is also a flip side, which is whenever there is terrorism in their neighborhood, or whenever something happens in their neighborhood, that gets rich nations interested. That's America, Saudi Arabia, even China. That's when the Pakistanis can start claiming rent. So they are now hoping that by creating this scare about Afghanistan, that ISIS may again grow there and may again threaten the Western world. Also by promising the Americans and the Western world and the Saudis that they will help put pressure on the Iranians, they are again hoping that they'll be able to get rent. However, they've used the same playbook far too many times and for far too long in their history. Just living on rent. In the 1950s and early 60s, they did that with the Americans, saying that we are the bulwark against communism because you are worried about Soviet power coming out of Afghanistan. So you strengthen us. We'll be a member of your security alliances. Now they're looking at one more opportunity. Whatever you know about Donald Trump, the last thing he's going to do is spray his money anywhere. Now see what's happened with Bangladesh. I told you Bangladesh had its years of instability. In 2003, in 2001, 2, 3, Bangladesh for the first time fell below India's per capita income in 2003. And that is when they began to get their political instability because they had chosen a democracy, not perfect, no democracy is perfect, but in their case, their democracy is much less imperfect than Pakistan's. Also, the culture of democracy is much stronger in Bangladesh than in Pakistan. Bangladesh doesn't like periods when a non-constitutional or unconstitutional arrangement runs their countries. That is when the Bangladeshis lost their advantage. 2001 to 2006, Khalida Zia was there. She ran her government in a very insipid way, particularly as she also was hostile to India, her most important neighbor, and did not invest so much in Bangladesh. However, that began to change when Sheikh Hasina came in. When Sheikh Hasina came in, Bangladesh started getting its growth back and became an export power, particularly with its garment business and large-scale employment of women in its garment factories, and also rapidly improving social indicators, particularly sanitations and also birth rates. That's why you have a situation now, because of Bangladesh's recovery, that Pakistan is now, it is about 60%. It's about 60% of India's per capita GDP. It's also only about 62.43 of Bangladesh's per capita GDP. That's about two-thirds, less than two-thirds of Bangladesh's per capita GDP. They were actually just 60% last year. So this gap they've been able to fill, not because they've had more economic growth, but because under Muhammad Yunus and after the instability, Bangladesh's own economic growth has declined. You want to read more about that? Read an article, read a column by Vidisha Bhattacharya, who writes our economics column, economics with an X, not CS. I will share links with you. Unlike me, she's a genuine economist with a PhD. So please read that article. You can also watch it on video. That will give us all a better understanding of what's happening in Bangladesh. In case of Pakistan, if you just look at the timelines, I might have been inclined to say that wherever Pakistan has military rule, their economy does better. But you know what? That would be lazy, because it's just so happened that whenever they have military rule, they get something happening in their neighborhood that attracts the Western powers, so they can extract rent out of it. I don't think it would be very different if that opportunity to collect rent arrived even when an elected government was in power in Pakistan. In any case, an elected government being in power and holding real power in Pakistan is an oxymoron. It hasn't yet happened.